Part 51. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 501. Chapter 501 Probably a werewolf. After 2 busy days and the exam was over, Jang Won-an said that she could finally relax. She is almost exhausted. She has lost a lot of hair these days because she is busy with exams. Fortunately, her hair is thick, otherwise she might not be able to hold on. As soon as she got home after the exam, she collapsed on the sofa. Loses who couldn't help but laugh at her look. Jang Won-an glared at him fiercely and asked, "Why are you laughing? A top student like you won't understand how hard it is for me, a scumbag, to suddenly work hard." Loses who smiled, sat next to her, picked up her fleshy little arm, squeezed it gently, and said, "I understand." "How do you understand?" "That's a lie," Jang Won-an said and reached out to hit him. Loses who hissed and pretended to be in pain, but Jang Won-an saw it and glared at him hard and said, "Don't pretend. The pain of being a scumbag, you don't understand." Alas, Jang Won-an slumped on the sofa and sighed. Had she known that she would be so tired from trying so hard now, she would have studied hard, so that she would not have to make up for her previous lessons. Loses who smiled and pinched her legs to help her relax, and then said, "Don't forget, I was always by your side to review with you when you were studying." "Ah. What, have you lost your memory?" Loses who raised his eyes to look at her. Jang Won-an stretched out her hand forward without saying anything. Loses who understood and freed up a hand to pull her up. She sat up straight and leaned her head on Loses who's shoulder and said, "There is no amnesia. So, I was with you when you were awake, so I understand," Loses who said seriously. Jang Won-an looked at him deeply, nodded, stretched out her hand and patted his shoulder hard and said, "I understand, we are people who share the same sorrow." There are no words to answer. Asterisk. The results came out soon after the holiday. Loses whose scores have been stable, while Jang Won-an's scores have skyrocketed. When Jang Won-an saw the transcript presented in front of her eyes, she covered her mouth in surprise, thinking she was cheating, right? "Isn't this result too surprising?" Loses who, hit me. She kept staring at the transcript and never left. Loses who looked at her suspiciously, feeling confused. "Why are I beating you? Let me see if it hurts. I might be dreaming. Hit me quickly, hit me." Seeing Loses who's delay in taking action, Jang Won-an couldn't help but urge him. Loses who shook his head and said truthfully, "If I don't want to let go, please beat me." He stretched out his arm as he spoke. Jang Won-an glanced at him and then lowered his head and bit it without hesitation. Loses who felt the pain and hissed, thinking that this was too decisive, right? "How can you swallow it? This thing is finished." Although he felt bitter in his heart, he could only hold it in and not speak out, for fear that speaking out would trigger an unnecessary war. Jang Won-an heard him cry out in pain but was still unwilling to admit it, so she decisively bit her arm again. Loses whose eyes widened and he blocked it in time and brought his arm in front of her again. Jang Won-an didn't react and bit him again. Of the other arm. Loses who frowned tightly, thinking that this was probably a werewolf. "It's okay if he suffers some pain, just don't let that silly girl hurt yourself, it's too scary." Jang Won-an blinked her big eyes, and then murmured as if she had woken up from a dream, "It's true, I won't delay Xiao Jojo anymore, I can work harder, we are on the same road." Loses who listened to all her words and felt uncomfortable in his heart. He put down his aching arm, reached out to pull Jang Won-an into his arms, kissed the top of her hair and said, "Fool, who said you delayed me? Why are you so stupid?" Jang Won-an shook his head, looked ahead with bright eyes and said, "You're not stupid, it's worth it." End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 502. Chapter 502, Be Good, Mrs. Liu. Jang Won-an shook his head, looked ahead with bright eyes and said, You're not stupid, it's worth it. Silly loses who sneered. Does it hurt? Zhang Wanan asked suddenly. Loses who looked at the two arms with teeth marks on them. He shook his head. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's quite amazing. It hurt just a moment ago, but now I hold someone in my arms and it doesn't hurt anymore. This is probably what everyone calls the power of love. The power of love is really great. I'm sorry, I bit you, Zhang Wanan said apologetically. She felt that everything was unreal and in a daze just now, so in a daze she bit Loses who twice, and very hard. It's okay, I'm not angry, Loses who said, patting her back gently. I will continue to work hard and try to become better, Zhang Wanan said inspiringly. Loses who sighed in her ear and said jokingly, you are already good enough. Do you want to surpass me? Zhang Wan smiled, reached out and pinched his waist and said, you are a top student. I will probably never be able to surpass you in this life. So this is the reason why you pinched me, Loses who felt pain again. He thought to himself that women are really weird. They were apologizing to themselves just now, but they did it again. Zhang Wanan pushed him away, put some distance between him and playfully stuck out his tongue and said, although I may not be able to surpass you, I can be a member of your Lu family. Loses whose face was filled with smile when he heard what she said. He liked to hear this, he liked it very much, and he should say it more in the future. Be good, Mrs. Lu. Loses who patted Zhang Wanan on the head with satisfaction. At first Zhang Wanan thought it was nothing, but when she heard the ambiguous words Mrs. Lu, she instantly blushed with embarrassment. Disgusting, Zhang Wanan scolded in a low voice, turned around and ran towards the room. She is very tired now, so sleeping is the best thing to do. Even after the holidays, Zhang Wanan was not idle. She customized a plan for herself, almost all of which was related to studying the content of the new semester, and there were few opportunities to go out and play. Loses who was also busy studying for the college entrance examination, so the two of them began to study together without disturbing each other. However, Zhang Wanan could still ask Loses who for advice if he didn't understand anything. Lin 11 now comes back and passes their door every day when she opens the door and sees the shadow of the two studying. On the one hand, she feels very relieved, but on the other hand, she feels distressed. Aunt Lu, make a pot of chicken soup for my two babies tonight, Lin 11 went downstairs and ordered. Aunt Lu agreed. She often saw the two of them studying in the past few days. It must be very hard. Would you like to send some fruit up? Aunt Lu asked. Lin 11 was lowering her head to adjust her coat. She glanced at Aunt Liu's words and said, give some away, Aunt Lu. I have to go out and be back before dinner. Aunt Lu nodded, then turned to ask Xiaolan to wash the fruits. Lin 11 put her clothes in order, took her bag, and then walked out while making a phone call. She is going to do something big now, something exciting and joyful. Perhaps the person who should be most excited is not her, but someone else. Before Lu Lin went back, Lin 11 drove the car by herself. Before starting the car, she sent a message asking Lu Lin to come find her after get off work. So Lu Lin, as a wife slave, picked up the vibrating phone during the meeting and raised his lips slightly. Information. Boss, no. That's it for today, the meeting time will be arranged separately. Lu Lin stood up, straightened his coat and strode outside before the employee finished speaking. He was not willing to let Lin 11 wait there alone for a long time. The most important thing in the world was his wife. So the two of them drove respectively, one starting from home and the other starting from the company. Although the starting points were different, the destinations were the same. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 503. Chapter 503 She is back. So the two of them drove respectively, one starting from home and the other starting from the company. Although the starting points were different, the destinations were the same. About 40 minutes later, the two people arrived at the airport almost at the same time. In the vast sea of people, Llewellyn saw Lin 11 standing there waiting for someone at a glance. He smiled and walked over there. "Honey, I'm here." Llewellyn walked over and patted Lin 11 on the back. Lin 11 turned around in surprise and asked, "Aren't you going to have a meeting? Why are you here so early?" Llewellyn looked around the huge place and said, "How can I let you wait alone? There is no one in the world as good as you." After speaking, he stretched out his hand to hold Lin 11's hand. Lin 11 complained with a cut sound, "Poor mouth." Even though she said this, Lin 11 was still very happy. She was very lucky that Llewellyn could still pamper her after so many years of marriage. The two of them have been waiting at the pickup gate. Lin 11 has been looking around anxiously. Compared to Lin 11 and Llewellyn, he is much calmer. "Don't be anxious, we'll be there in a moment," Llewellyn comforted him. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin 11's eyes immediately widened, and then he shook Llewellyn's arms with both hands and said excitedly, "Come on, come on." Llewellyn looked over and saw that he was coming. Lin 11 waved excitedly, and then the familiar figure walked towards the two of them. After approaching, Lin 11 immediately hugged him and said, "Ayu, you are finally back." That's right, the person they picked up at the airport this time was Tang Yu, and she was back. Tang Yu also hugged Lin 11 and said, "I'm back. I've worked hard for you during my absence." The two hugged each other in front of Llewellyn for a while before they separated. Lin 11 looked Tang Yu up and down, tisk and praised several times, "Not bad, not bad, not thin." Tang Yu's nose felt sore when he heard what she said, and his eyes turned red. He said, "I have gone to such a beautiful place, how could I treat myself badly? It is all our memories. To be honest, that place is really healing." Although Tang Yu still thinks of him after going there, she no longer has insomnia, and she doesn't need to rely on any medicine. She just needs to walk on the street every day and take a stroll. "You will feel extremely good." Lin 11 was very relieved to hear what she said. She nodded, "Just figure it out." "Oh, you two sisters always have endless things to talk about. Why don't we talk about it after we get in the car?" Llewellyn, who had been left out for a long time, finally couldn't help but interrupt the two of them. The two people nodded and held each other's arms and walked to the front, but Llewellyn was still abandoned alone. He looked at the backs of the two of them and was a little angry. If he had known this, he would have been busy working in the company. Why did he come to suffer like this? Since they each drove a car, the three of them could not sit in the same car. In the end, Llewellyn was left alone, while Lin 11 and Tang Yu were in the same car. Before starting the car, Llewellyn suddenly ran to Lin 11's car, opened the door, and said, "Get down and I'll drive." "Ah. It's dangerous if you talk in a car," Llewellyn said and pulled her. Lin 11 got out of the car, looked at the other car, and asked, "Where's that one?" "I asked Uncle Lee to drive back," Llewellyn said and squeezed into the car, as if he was afraid that Lin 11 would drive him away in the next second. So Lin 11 compromised and went to the back to chat with Tang Yu and how Tang Yu was doing recently. The two sisters chatted for a long time. Llewellyn, who was in the front row, frowned. He didn't know what the two women had to talk about, but they kept talking endlessly. She is indeed a woman, and she will chatter endlessly when there are common topics in conversation. When he was almost home, Tang Yu looked ahead and said, "Anan doesn't know I'm coming, does she?" "I don't know yet. We have done a good job of keeping it secret. She will definitely be very happy when you go back soon. The little girl has performed well this year, and her grades have risen sharply." Lin 11 smiled and praised Zhang Wanan's recent performance. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 504. Chapter 504, No Future Again. Although Tang Yu is not around, they still talk about Zhangwanen's achievements when they call, but even now they feel very proud when they hear it again. But she still understands that Zhangwanen's ability to study so well without her is definitely due to their family and has nothing to do with her. Even though they all said that she was a qualified mother, she still felt that she owed Zhangwanen a lot. It's all thanks to your good teaching, Tang Yu said sincerely with a smile. Why don't we do it? The little girl is still sensible on her own. If she is not willing to learn, it will be useless for anyone to force her, Lin 11 said. Tang Yu thought it was the same thing. She smiled and stopped talking. The car arrived at the door of her home. Tang Yu looked at the familiar door and felt excited. She was back and could see her baby again. Tang Yu got out of the car and looked at the gate for a while. Lin 11 said at the side, "Go in." Tang Yu nodded, and the two of them walked inside. After opening the door, unexpectedly there was no figure of Zhangwanen lying on the sofa watching TV. Tang Yu frowned, "Aren't you here?" Lin 11 shook her head with a smile on her face and said, "The little girl is upstairs. They are both studying now." "Good work." Tang Yu nodded, "So that's it?" "Sure enough, the little girl has grown up and become a lot more sensible. Otherwise I won't go up and disturb you, right?" Tang Yu looked upstairs. "It's okay, go up. It's not a disturbance when you come back. Anan will be happy to see you," Lin 11 said. Tang Yu thought about it, and finally decided to go up and have a look. She hadn't seen the little girl for a long time and said that she didn't miss her. It was all lies. Tang Yu walked to the door quietly, raised his hand and knocked on the door. Zhangwanen's crisp voice came from inside, "Come in." Tang Yu felt his heart get excited as soon as he heard the little girl's voice. It turned out that she already missed the little girl so much. Lin 11 saw that she was still for a long time and motioned for her to open the door. Tang Yu came to his senses, held the door handle and pushed the door open. When she opened the door, she saw two figures, one large and one small, with their backs to her studying hard. Tang Yu felt his nose sore again. She sniffed and whispered softly, "Anan." Zhangwanen, who was writing a calculation problem, froze when he heard the voice, and his back became stiff. Could such a familiar voice be Lu's, who also heard the sound? He reacted faster than Zhangwanen. He turned his head almost immediately. When he saw the person standing at the door, he was startled. Then he immediately stood up and called politely, "Aunt Tang." "Aunt Tang?" The three words reached Zhangwanen's ears. She turned around suddenly and saw the woman standing at the door. Zhangwanen's eyes turned red almost instantly. The person who can only touch through the screen is finally back, right? Isn't this a dream? Lu's who, pinch me, Zhangwanen said this, but her eyes never left Tang Yu. "Anan, it's true, Aunt Tang is back," Lu's who pinched her reluctantly, but reminded her in a low voice. After hearing this, Zhangwanen couldn't help but smile brightly, then ran over and got into Tang Yu's arms. It's real and tangible, it's real, it's back." Mom Zhangwanen hugged Tang Yu and called out, her voice full of longing. Tang Yu hugged the little girl and patted her gently and said, "Mom is back." Zhangwanen nodded and said in a low voice, "Mom is back, back." Mother and daughter hugged each other for a long time. Zhangwanen couldn't help but wet Tang Yu's clothes with her tears. She really couldn't control it. After crying, she laughed again, and said with a smile, "My mother's clothes have been stained, and I have no future." End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 505. Chapter 505. It feels so good to be supported by both parents. Anan is the most promising child, Tang Yu said, rubbing her head. Zhangwanen raised her head and looked at Tang Yu, her eyes still moist from crying. Anan behaved very well while Mom was away, so Mom decided to give Anan a gift. "Can we go downstairs?" After wiping away her tears, Tang Yu said. Zhang nodded hurriedly when he heard there was a gift, stretched out his hand to wipe away his tears and looked at Tang Yu eagerly. Tang Yu couldn't help but smile when he looked at her little appearance, and then said, "Let's go down." Zhang nodded, held Tang Yu's hand tightly and walked downstairs. Lu Zizhu, who was abandoned aside, stood alone, feeling that everything was like a dream. He didn't come back to his senses until Lin 11 called him. "Aunt Tang just came back today?" Lu Zizhu asked. "Yes, I haven't told you before. I wanted to give you a surprise," Lin 11 said. Lu Zizhu nodded, "That's it? Let's go down too," Lin 11 said and walked out. Lu Zizhu followed soon after. The mother and daughter had already gone downstairs, and they heard Zhang Wanan's call just halfway there, so they quickened their pace and walked that way. When they walked over, Tang Yu's suitcase was open on the sofa, and the sofa was also full of things. Lin 11 said yeah and asked in surprise, "Did you come back with a suitcase of gifts?" Tang Yu nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, you are all tired at home during this trip, so I brought it to you specially." "Do you think you still have mine?" Lin 11 asked jokingly. Tang Yu smiled and said, "No one can be missing you." As she spoke, she arranged the gift boxes and lined them up one by one. When Tang Yu finished arranging them, she took the one on the far left to Lin 11 and said, "This is for you and Lao Lu. It's a couple bracelet. I hope your relationship will get better and better." Lin 11 was a little stunned, and a little happy when she took it. She didn't know what to say, so she had to say thank you. Lu Lin didn't know where he went just now. He happened to hear Tang Yu's words when he came in. He came over and said cheerfully, "Oh, do you still have my share?" "I'm not happy to get Dai La." Lin Zibai glanced at him and hugged the gift box tightly. Tang Yu smiled and looked at the two people unconsciously stroking the bracelet on his wrist. If he were there, the other one wouldn't have to lie alone in the jewelry box. "Mom, where's ours?" Zhang Wanan was a little anxious as to why she didn't have a gift yet. Her words brought Tang Yu back from his thoughts. She reached out and took the box in front of her, handed it to Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu and said, "I know you two already have a lot of couple bracelets, couple outfits and the like. But, I still want to give you one, it's my intention. You should also be well," she added. Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu took the gift box together and said thank you together. The two looked at each other and smiled. It felt so good to be supported by both parents. Tang Yu had not finished sending these, because there were still several gift boxes in front of her, so she picked up another one and presented it to Lin 11, "Bao, I gave it to you, thank you for your hard work. Dress, as a reward for Anan, please work hard." Tang Yu presented another box to Zhang Wanan. "Xiaozhou, I'll give you a suit, you'll be 18 soon. Lao Lu, I'll give you a tie if you have anything to do, ask Axi to wear it for you. This time the distribution has been completely completed. A few people looked at me and I looked at you. Suddenly I felt that this feeling was not bad. I might want to consider how to send Tang Yu away again. Maybe they will receive so many gifts next time they come back. Even though I think so, they are always the ones I miss when I am gone." After the gifts were distributed, the family started chatting again before the meal was ready. The chat couldn't stop, and the whole villa was full of laughter. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 506. Chapter 506. I'm afraid I have to stay here for a few days. After the gifts were distributed, the family started chatting again before the meal was ready. The chat couldn't stop, and the whole villa was full of laughter. Just when the whole family was chatting happily, the doorbell rang. Because their voices were covered by the ringing of the doorbell, no one in the villa heard the sound and ignored the person who rang the doorbell. Until the phone rings. Whose phone rang? Lulin was confused when he heard the voice. Everyone shook their heads, and Jongwanan suddenly reacted and raised his hand. It seems to be mine, where is it? Everyone. So the family began to search for their cell phones by following the noise. Finally, Luzes who found the cell phone in the gap of the sofa, but the cell phone had stopped ringing long ago. He glanced at the screen of his mobile phone that was still on and said, "It's Sioran." Huh? Sister Ran. Jongwanan ran over and took the phone in surprise. "You're coming to play with me, right?" Jongwanan was a little excited. She walked to the side with her cell phone and planned to call back. Before I could return the call, the doorbell rang again, and this time everyone heard it. "You call me back first, and I'll open the door," Luzes who said, already walking towards the door with long legs. Jongwanan's call only rang twice before being hung up. She glanced at the phone in confusion and wanted to call again when she heard Luzes who's shout. Jongwanan walked over and responded. "Sioran is here," Luzes who shouted again. Jongwanan was overjoyed and instantly changed from walking to trotting. She ran to the door and saw Sioran standing at the door with her head down at a loss, while Luzes who stood aside in embarrassment. Jongwanan walked over and shouted, "Sister Ran, why are you here? Do you want to stay?" She was a little excited and wanted Sioran to live here. Sioran didn't speak, just sniffed and looked up at her. Jongwanan felt something was wrong, and after taking a closer look, she realized that Sioran's eyes were red, as if she had just cried. She walked over and took Sioran's hand. "Sister Ran, come back to the room with me. Go back to your room. If you have anything to do, we can talk about it later." She knew Sioran wouldn't say it here. Sioran didn't say anything and let Jongwanan lead her away. But when he walked to the living room, Sioran couldn't remain silent anymore, because 3 pairs of eyes looked in his direction. Uncle Lu, Aunt Lin, they came over without saying hello. "Sorry to bother you," Sioran said and bowed slightly. It's okay, just come over and play during the holiday," Lin 11 said with a smile. "That's my mother," Jongwanan pointed at Tangyu and said. Sioran had heard her father talk about Jongwanan's life experience before, so she didn't have much doubt when Jongwanan introduced Tangyu. "Hello, Auntie." Sioran leaned over and said to Tangyu again. Tangyu smiled slightly at her as a response. Sioran basically didn't dare to raise her head. She didn't want to be watched by so many people, so she reached out and grabbed the hem of Jongwanan's clothes. Jongwanan understood and said to several adults, "We 2 sisters went upstairs to catch up with each other and we will be down in a while." The adults had no objections and allowed the 2 men to go up. However, after taking a few steps, Jongwanan noticed Luzes who following behind. She glanced back, said nothing but made a gesture, so Luzes who went back again. The 2 sisters went upstairs to their room and closed the door. Only then did Jongwanan dare to ask, "What's wrong, Sister Ran?" Her eyes were red, she must have been crying because something happened. Sioran sat down and looked at Jongwanan and said, "I'm afraid I have to live here for a few days. I don't want to go back to that home now." Jongwanan was shocked when he heard this. What happened? Sioran was silent for a while and Jongwanan was not in a hurry, but walked aside and got a piece of candy for Sioran. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 507. Chapter 507. The only person who is somewhat dependent. Sioran was silent for a while and Jongwanan was not in a hurry, but walked aside and got a piece of candy for Sioran. "It's sour and sweet, and you'll feel better after eating it," Jongwanan said. Sioran smiled and took it, opened the package and put it in her mouth. After a few minutes, she answered the question Jongwanan just asked. My parents have been getting divorced and quarreling for the past 2 days. I couldn't bear it anymore, so I wanted to go away and hide away, but I didn't know where to go. Then I remembered you and I came over. I don't know if it bothered me. She just looked at the bright lights in the villa, but after ringing the doorbell several times and no one opened the door, she almost collapsed and thought she was going to have no place to go. She has no friends. They are the only people she knows and relies on, so when no one cares about her, she feels really panicked. After all, it is already so late and she doesn't know what to do. Jongwon opened her mouth after listening to Sioran's words. Luz's whose parents never had any quarrels. She only had a mother and no father. This situation had never happened in her family, so she didn't know what to say. For the first time, she felt helpless because she could not comfort others. Sioran obviously saw her embarrassment. She smiled and said, "You don't have to comfort me. I know this has never happened in your family. Maybe my parents just got divorced out of anger. Maybe it will be fine in a few days." Even though she said that, she had already seen that her parents were no longer in love, and quarrels had long been a common occurrence. This time the quarrels were severe, so the possibility of divorce was very high this time. It's not like she hasn't tried to persuade her, but it's useless. Jongwon nodded. She still didn't know how to make Sioran happy. Suddenly an idea flashed through her and she smiled and asked, "Sister Ran, do you want to meet Gu Jinchu? Let's make an appointment with him." Sioran admitted that she was a little moved, but after thinking about it, she shook her head and refused and said, "Forget it, I've been in a bad mood and state recently, let's talk about it in a few days." She didn't want to appear in front of Gu Jinchu in a bad state. Jongwon couldn't force it and had to give up. The two sisters talked for a while before a knock on the door came. "Come down for dinner." It was Luz's whose voice. Jongwon responded and went to pull Sioran. "Let's go, sister, let's go eat." No one would have trouble with food, not to mention that she had been hungry for another day, so of course she would not refuse. It would be nice if she thought about some things clearly. When they walked downstairs, the whole family had already sat down. After Sioran sat down, she heard Lulin say, "Sioran, your father just called and asked you to stay here for a few more days. He has something to do to deal with." Sioran was stunned and nodded. "Then I'll bother my uncle and aunt." How could she not know what Xiaodong was busy with? As expected, it was between him and her mother. It didn't matter, just let them go, her life was still long. A lifetime is so long, and everyone has the right to pursue happiness. If you really figure it out and don't regret it, then that's okay. Lulin and Lin 11 hurriedly said that it was okay, but they just thought about what Xiaodong said on the phone just now and felt a little sorry for the little girl. No wonder she drooped her head and refused to raise her head when she came in. It turned out to be caused by the two adults in the family. Parents quarreling and getting divorced still have a great impact on children. After dinner, the family chatted as usual, but Sioran, who had been tired for a day, had no interest in it, so she only chatted with everyone for a few words before going upstairs to rest. She had already gone to bed early, and because she was very tired today, she almost fell asleep. Jongwon watched her sleep and didn't dare to disturb her. She gently closed the door and returned to the living room. "Xiaoran is asleep," Lin 11 glanced upstairs and asked. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 508. Chapter 508. He is from the trash can next to you. Xiaoran is asleep, Lin 11 glanced upstairs and asked. Jongwon nodded. "I just fell asleep, I guess I was too tired." "It's not easy for this kid." Lulin raised his head and glanced upstairs and sighed. Jongwon knew what Father Lu meant by his words, but just smiled and said nothing. "You guys have fun with Sioran these days and try to make her feel better," Lin 11 said. "Don't worry, Mom, Sister Ran Ran will definitely feel the same when I'm with you, Zhang Wanan said firmly. Luzas who said cut on the side, you are awesome. I feel like you're not convinced. Zhang Wanan looked at him calmly and said. Luzas who looked at her and waved her hands quickly, saying, I'm convinced. He was very convinced, but he was a little dissatisfied with Zhang Wanan for ignoring him several times today, but he didn't dare to say it since everyone was here. Just accept it. If you don't accept it, I will sue you in public. Zhang Wanan was not afraid of having someone behind him. Luzas who is not guilty, so he is naturally not afraid. He said, how can you sue me if I'm not guilty? You are not guilty because I am not guilty. My parents believe me anyway. If you don't believe me, just watch, Zhang Wanan said confidently. You have already told everyone your plan in front of everyone. Do you think anyone will believe you if you complain again? Luzas who raised his eyebrows. Zhang Wanan looked at everyone and was a little angry. Just as she was about to speak, she heard the voices of Lu Lin and Lin 11. Yes, I believe it. Yes, I believe it. The couple shouted almost in unison. Luzas who was stunned for a moment, thinking that he must not be his biological child. This status is simply a world of difference, and it is simply too difficult for him. Mom and Dad, tell the truth, am I your biological child? Can we do a paternity test together another day? Luzas whose lips twitched a little. I've told him several times that you're not my biological son. Why don't you believe me? Lu Lin said with disgust, as if it was embarrassing to have a son like him. Luzas who was really speechless. He couldn't fight against three people, especially since his future mother-in-law was still here. He couldn't do anything to Zhang Wanan, so he had to suffer the disadvantage of being mute. Who would have known that when he was alone and crying secretly, Tang Yu spoke. She said tisk and said, do you always bully Xiaozhou like this? Absolutely. It's not his biological son anyway. Lin 11 waved his hands and acted indifferently, as if Luzas who was really not a piece of flesh that fell off his body. Tang Yu smiled helplessly, then suddenly became serious and said, this is my future son-in-law. He is considered a son. I can't let you bully me every day. Especially Anan, don't bully Xiaozhou all the time, Tang Yu said and looked at Zhang Wanan. Luzas who felt deeply moved when he heard what his mother-in-law said. He couldn't be too happy. It turned out that there was still someone willing to speak for him. Zhang Wanan was a little helpless. She imitated what Luzas who had just said, to be honest, am I not my biological child? Fool, you were picked up from mom's trash can, Tang Yu deliberately teased her. Zhang Wanan cooperated with a helpless expression, I knew it was like this. I will go to the trash can tomorrow to find someone to claim it. That's just right, take Xiaozhou with you, he belongs to the trash can next to you, Lu Lin said suddenly. Zhang Wanan and Luzas who looked at Lu Lin almost at the same time. Is this a joke? The guy who also has the trash can next door is pretty good at talking. Xiaozhou, pack your bags, we'll leave tomorrow. No, we'll leave overnight, Zhang Wanan said with a dashing wave of her chubby hand. What's the matter? This little girl who was favored just now has now been reduced to going back to the trash can to find her biological parents. This reversal is too unexpected. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 509. Chapter 509, Who do you go with when your parents get divorced? The whole night passed by as a family talking and laughing. There was one more person in the Lu family after waking up. Zhang Wanan was a little surprised when he saw the person downstairs, but the one who was even more surprised was Xia Ran. Ran Ran, you have grown up. Your parents are getting divorced. You can choose who you want to marry. This was the first thing Xia Dong said when he saw Xia Ran. She was stunned for a moment, but she knew that the relationship between the two of them would end sooner or later, but she didn't expect it to happen so soon, just overnight. One night, everything changed. Sioran wanted to cry, but she bit her lips and said coldly, "I won't follow anyone, I can do it myself." Sioran said nothing and didn't look at Xiaodong again. She turned around and went upstairs again, full of disgust. But she also understood that it was not Guang Xiaodong's fault. They had no feelings for a long time. It would be better to separate if they were delayed by being together. Just like she thought last night, a life is very long and no one should be delayed. Who? Zhang Wanan was afraid that Sioran would be sad, so she bowed slightly to Xiaodong and followed him. Xiaodong was a little embarrassed and helpless when he saw his daughter who went upstairs and ignored him, but most of all he felt indebted. "Excuse me, I have something to do. I'll talk to Ran Ran in the evening," he stood up and said awkwardly to Lu Lin. Lu Lin shook his head and sent him away. Children are always the ones who get hurt when their parents divorce. Lin 11 sighed. "Don't go to the store today. Take a day's rest at home and look after the children," Lu Lin said after seeing Xiaodong off. The little girl looked very uncomfortable, so she left her alone at home just in case. Lin 11 nodded and compromised. Upstairs, Zhang Wanan and Luzes who were sitting together. Sitting opposite was Sioran. She was hugging a pillow tightly and was unwilling to speak. Zhang Wanan felt at a loss for words again. She didn't know what to do to comfort her, but she felt uncomfortable seeing Sioran in pain, so she looked helplessly at Luzes who. Obviously Luzes who didn't know what to do, so the two of them could only sit awkwardly. "I'm fine, don't worry," Sioran comforted them first not to worry. "It will all pass," Zhang Wanan said dryly, because she really didn't know what to say. Sioran nodded. Nothing was difficult, it was like she had no friends before, but now she has them. After a long time, Sioran looked up at the two people and said, "I want to sleep for a while. You guys should go out first." "It's really okay." Zhang Wanan and Luzes who exchanged glances, nodded, and stood up. "Call me if you need anything," Zhang Wanan said. Sioran smiled at the two of them. The moment the two closed the door, the smile on his face disappeared and turned into a sad face. It's a lie to say that her parents are getting divorced and it won't affect her. The two people who walked out of the room happened to bump into Tang Yu. She had just come back and had not gone to the store. She was about to go home. Zhang Wanan immediately ran over and hugged her, calling Mom and acting like a baby. "Mom has to go home to tidy up and stay there tonight. Do you want to go back with Mom?" Tang Yu touched her head and asked. Zhang Wanan said and frowned. Sister Ran Ran is not happy yet. "How about Mom staying here for a few more days? Let's go back together for a few days." "Here, Mom, go back first. If you want to go back in a few days, I'll pick you up." "Okay," Tang Yu thought for a while and said. "But Mom is alone." Zhang Wanan's brows were still furrowed, feeling something was wrong. Tang Yu knew what she was worried about. He shook his head with a smile and said, "Don't worry, my mother is fine. She can fall asleep at night, and she won't feel bad alone." Zhang Wanan looked at Tang Yu for a while, as if she wanted to see some flaw, but she didn't see it, so she compromised. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 510. Chapter 510 Children Who Long for a Family. Zhang Wanan looked at Tang Yu for a while, as if she wanted to see some flaw, but she didn't see it, so she compromised. The two of them walked behind to see Tang Yu out the door. After seeing off Tang Yu, the two of them went to the living room to sit boredly, but after only sitting for a while, Zhang Wanan couldn't sit still. She was still worried about Sioran. "It's okay, I'll probably just take a nap and it'll be fine," Luzes who said. Zhang Wanan gouged out his eyes fiercely and said, "Do you think she really slept when she said she was sleeping? Can she still sleep in such a situation?" Luzes who was speechless. So Jongwanan began to murmur to herself again, why do some people end up like this when they could have a happy home? They don't know how those children who long for a happy home feel. The child she was talking about who longed for a happy family was herself. Although her life in the Lu family was not bad, she still wanted to have the feeling of having her father and biological parents by her side. That kind of home is a complete home. Luzes who understood the meaning of her words. After thinking about it, he put his arms around her and said, Anan, you have us. Jongwanan nuzzled into his arms and nodded, saying, I want to sleep too. Then go to sleep. Luzes who raised his head and glanced upstairs. But I can't sleep. Jongwanan supported him to sit up again. Worry, in addition to worry, worry. The two of them were sitting in a daze, and Lin 11 came down from upstairs. She just passed by Sioran's room and took a look, but she couldn't see anything with the door closed, and she didn't knock on the door. So she was curious about how Sioran was doing now. Why are you two here? Is Sioran okay? She asked as she sat on the sofa. I said I wanted to sleep, Luzes who said. I probably won't be able to sleep, Jongwanan added. Lin 11 sighed helplessly after listening to the two people's words. She had no choice but to leave the child alone. Uncle Xia will come over to talk to her in the evening. Let Sioran be alone for now. You can send some food up later and take a look at her, Lin 11 explained. The two of them nodded obediently after listening to Lin 11's words. She had no choice but to let Sioran calm down and think carefully. Lin Zixi had nothing to do and picked up a magazine to read. The two people next to him had nothing to do and sat close to each other in silence. The doorbell rang in silence and reached the ears of the three people. Lin 11 looked at each other and stood up, saying, maybe it's Uncle Xia. It's not even night yet. Jongwanan was a little confused, as it wasn't even noon yet. Maybe you're worried, Lin 11 said, waving her hand to signal Aunt Lu, who was about to open the door, to go back, and she walked towards the door to open the door. They were already sitting upright and wanted to say hello when Xia Dong came in. However, it was not Xia Dong who was brought in by Lin 11, but the carefree Gu Jinchu. Luzes who saw his disgusted expression and asked, why are you here? Why can't I come? Gu Jinchu, who was disliked as soon as he entered the door, was confused. Xiaozhou Lin 11 glared at him to indicate that he must not be rude. Luzes who shrugged and said nothing, but Gu Jinchu knew that he was making trouble with him, so he didn't care. Compared to Luzes who was very disgusted with Gu Jinchu, Jongwanan seemed very happy. When she saw Gu Jinchu, her dull eyes lit up instantly and she looked straight at him. Lin 11 went to get some fruit, and now there are only three of them in the living room. Jongwanan looked at Gu Jinchu's eyes without any cover-up, just staring at them, not afraid of being embarrassed either herself or the other person. Luzes who and Gu Jinchu both noticed it. End of this chapter.